Hey, Feld, you say you care about the sport, the riders, the teams, the companies. Well, put your money where your mouth is, and why don't you throw some financial investment to KTM, a company that is admittedly in a bit of a financial predicament due to their own mismanagement. However, it also goes without saying that they played a huge role in building the sport. They've invested massively in amateur racing, grassroots sort of rider participation, as well as sort of the top tier factory teams, and they need some money. And why don't you, the company that is overwhelmingly profited off the massive investment and effort and energy that KTM has put forth in participating in Supercross and motocross and have seen nothing in return, why don't you throw some money their way? Even if it was just a gesture, just a recognition that, man, you guys have played a large role in this sport that we are making an incredible amount of money from. You are in a bad financial way. Now, this is due to their own sort of missteps, but we're going to hook you up. We're going to provide some semblance of a way to recoup everything that you've poured into the sport while we have given you absolutely nothing in return. And this speaks to the larger issue that, as exploited as the riders are, to a far greater degree, it is the teams that are really looking like the biggest losers. The teams fund this sport. You take the teams out, there is no sport. They pretty much provide all of the financial backing, all of the staff, the engineers, the manpower, the bikes, the technology, the traveling expenses. They are the engine that enables Supercross to continue to function, and they get absolutely nothing in return. Now, this is not news. Chris Cooksey, and I'm continuing to talk about him because he is the only person that brings these issues to light, but a big reason why we see so many privateer or privately funded teams come into the sport, generally from enthusiast individuals that just enjoy the sport, are fans themselves, are riders themselves, want to contribute. And what happens is after a few years, they realize Supercross is just milking me dry. This is just like a endless run to the bottom because there's no way to recuperate the losses. Look at JGR, look at Geico Honda, look at RCH. There's just, because they don't get any degree of profit sharing from Supercross, from the ticket sales, from the promotional end, from the TV money, they don't get any of it. It is just a undeniable faucet of money that turns on and pretty much runs them dry. Every dollar that comes in goes out, and this is just a fundamentally broken system. It is unfair, most importantly. I hate seeing a huge number of tough, gritty, and people involved in dirt bikes are some of the toughest people out there. They do not complain, and this is part of why we love the sport, but this is also what's creating a position where people like Feld in these suits that have nothing to do with dirt bikes, that don't ride dirt bikes, that probably don't give two shits about the sport, are making tens of millions and hundreds of millions of dollars and doing nothing in return. And it's time for people to start saying, okay, this isn't working for us. We are putting forth everything. We are funding the sport. We are doing all the work, and you guys are making all the money. And if teams participated to some degree in this revenue sharing, it would make a massive difference, not only for, okay, the Jet Lawrences and the Eli Tomacks, sure, they're going to make some more money. They're already rich. It's more so the smaller teams, the privateer efforts, those smaller outfits that are operating on a shoestring budget. It is unbelievably expensive to race just to race dirt bikes. It's expensive. And when you don't have any way to participate in that money being generated, and there is a lot of money being generated because Supercross popularity as it is at a all-time high, and so there's definitely more eyeballs on the sport arguably than ever before, but there's not more money coming in from the broadcast side, and there's not enough for it to provide a sort of lifeline, to provide a revenue source for these smaller teams. And those would be the biggest beneficiaries of this profit sharing, is the smaller teams, the sort of the privateers, those outfits that are operating on a very tight budget, that don't really have any extra money in what money would be generated. And obviously, it is not going to be equal across the teams because their investment is not equal. But I believe it would have a massive impact on the sport and sort of the trickle down effect in allowing these smaller non factory teams to have more money to hire staff, to hire riders, to invest in development programs. The same would go for Honda and Kawasaki. They would be able to hire more riders, and it would just improve the sport as a whole. It would also, I believe, provide that extra money to perhaps start a secondary series. So maybe for the non-top tier factory dudes, like a stepping stone to Supercross. I'm not saying to kick the privateers out of Supercross. I don't agree with that. I think that is antithetical to what the sport is about. But providing, in addition to Supercross, a secondary sort of feeder series that would provide these lower, sort of less notable privateers more exposure and more opportunity to make money, and more money coming in would just improve the sport. Chris Cooksey is the only person talking about this, but I believe the more people talking about it, the better, because clearly I believe this is on the minds of a lot of people, but many of those people are not saying it. Well, let's try to get this narrative increasingly accepted and break through sort of the stigma of, again, this sport is a blue collar, tough, sort of no complaining sport, and that's what we love it. But there's moments where it's not about complaining, it's about saying, okay, we're not going to be taken advantage of, and we're sick of having a handful of suits that have nothing to do with the sport making all the money. And that's what's happening currently. So let me know what you guys think. And yeah, it's an interesting time, because more than ever, there is a willingness to talk about this, and the more, the better, in my opinion.